Welcome back to another Cardinals Off Day podcast. I am one half of your hosting tandem, Ben Godar, and with me as always is my good friend Ben Humphrey. Ben, how are you doing?
I have had the melancholy of the end of summer hit me, and the reason being the kids are starting school up again soon, and it's like actually dark out when I wake up now, like dark. You know, I can go out and I can, see stars in the sky, and I know that there won't be much pool weather left, and the days just keep getting shorter, and it makes me sad. And this feeling, Ben, it used to drive me to KMOX to listen to Mike Shannon, but I haven't listened to KMOX since like May. And I probably won't listen to it in August or September because their broadcast crew is so bad, which made me even a little bit more melancholy, because something I enjoy has been stolen from me by Ricky Horton.
Oh, Ben, it's not just Ricky Horton, but we don't need to go into all of that. It's funny you mentioned the pool. I actually took my kids to the public swimming pool on Sunday. It was the last day of the season at Ashworth Pool over here, which I know you know as well.
Yes.
And I don't know, I mean, different communities are kind of in different stages. I think around here, like all the pools have kind of turned into like water parks now, except Ashworth is like the classic like big tank of water with a couple diving boards at one end that we grew up with. So I think we both really enjoy going there, and I have a real affinity for the radio, the like top 40 radio playing at the pool. Got a couple classics while we were there. "Peaceful Easy Feeling" by the Eagles. Not an Eagles fan, but that's a classic of the public pool genre. Heard some Hall & Oates. The one problem is now everybody's playing like some kind of playlist, so you don't get what really defines, I think, that public pool experience, which is the just absolutely like blaring radio ads that are like 4 times louder than the music. So anyway, but it was still a nice experience, but a little bittersweet with it being the end of the summer season.
And Ashworth has, for folks who are not from Central Iowa, or perhaps folks who are, it's like a 4-foot...
people who are not from Southwest Des Moines.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. It's a little bit,
It's like a 12-foot wide, like 4-foot tall, engraved inscription in front. And it's got like a pioneer with like a plow from pioneer days in the bottom. And it's like, "This plot of land has been donated by the Ashworth family to the city of Des Moines to be used as a pool for public enjoyment in perpetuity," or something like that. I don't have it exactly right, but it's this really great, like just engraving, like, you can take this pool from our cold dead hand because the Ashworth family donated it, and has like a restrictive covenant on it. It can only be used by the city for one thing.
That's true, but it is also sort of a throwback to when like we had like functional institutions and people believed in like the betterment of the public. But we don't need to go too far down that road. But Ben, we do need to talk about the St. Louis Cardinals, as you alluded to. The season goes on, and so since our last recording, which was 1 week ago, what have you learned?
Well, I was, Lars Nootbaar, of course, fouled a pitch off of his knee, and is once again hurt and perhaps injured, and so he's not doing me any favors by his current health status. But what I was gonna say, I've noticed, and understandably so, his performance took a dip, and a lot of folks, I think, at the trade deadline were like, "Hey, we need to get rid of this guy," and this is the type of subject, when I used to write for Viva El Birdos, made me think, as I'm reading over and over again, we need to get rid of this guy. I would be like, do we? Do we need to get rid of this guy? He is getting more expensive, so he's definitely heading in the price range where the Cardinals get rid of guys. But I was less interested in that and more interested in the performance. And what I dug up is basically Nootbaar started swinging and missing a lot right around the time he started having the issues with his torso, is what I'm going to say, because I'm not, you get kind of these vague things like rib cage or whatever, and I'm just like, well, what is a rib cage injury if it's not an actual rib? Like if it's a fractured rib, they tell you, but when it's rib cage, it feels a little more weird.
Well, when I look at the picture in the doctor's office, there's just a whole bunch of muscles kind of wrapped around in the middle there.
Yeah.
So it's
who knows?
One of them things.
Yeah, it's one of them things. And so I started looking at this, and his swing and miss rate just skyrocketed to a level it had not been since he first broke into the majors. Like, he went through a little spell where he swung and missed a lot. But this year it went even higher than that. And that coincided with his health issues, and to me it suggested pretty clearly that perhaps with the chorus of people talking about how fragile he is, singing in the background, he tried to play through it and just wasn't very good. And I'm here to say that I learned that perhaps we were judging Lars Nootbaar a little bit too harshly, and we need to see how he is swinging the bat now that he has come back from the injured list, and promptly fouled a ball off of his knee. So who knows? This experiment could be fatally flawed from the get-go. And I was very interested. It's not going to be quite what I'm looking for between now and the next podcast, but for the rest of the year, I'm going to be looking at swings and misses from Lars Nootbaar and what they tell us about his health. So,
Ben, you jumped to what you're looking for there. I think we were.
Well,
are you bridging the two?
Well, it's kind of a 2-for-1, but it was more.
Gotcha.
It gave me what I learned. Gave me something to look for. So I'm going to give folks what I'm looking for this episode, because I inadvertently dug one up while researching Lars Nootbaar's performance this year. What about you? What have you learned, Ben?
I learned, or had reaffirmed for me, that your bullpen is completely disposable, and but in a good way, Ben. And so as folks know, the one kind of trade deadline move the Cardinals made was to trade probably 3 of their 4 best relievers. I think JoJo, who stuck around, you'd probably have up in that mix too, right? But they basically dumped some of their highest leverage relief pitchers they'd used. Now during the first half of the season with those guys on the team, bullpen ERA of 3.8, 3.77 FIP. Since then, and I'm gonna preface this by saying, obviously we're in like small sample size territory since then, but since then 2.77 ERA, 2.87 FIP, and I'm sure that jibes with what everyone is seeing, which is that like the bullpen has looked really good since they left. And again, so it's a short window of time. I'm not going to say that those numbers tell the story, but I also think like it's completely reasonable to believe that this, this is what we have here with these guys, right? I don't really see a lot of reason to think that, Riley O'Brien, JoJo, Swanson, Leahy are going to be, demonstrably worse than Helsley, Matz, and Maton. And that's not something that's specific to those guys that went away or those guys that are here or this year. That's just how bullpens are. So you should always trade your bullpen guys if they have any value, and this is a good illustration of that. So, Ben, I just think again, it's my priors have been reaffirmed, and I'm always happy when that happens.
And it also helps when you can put John King on the injured list. So they traded away good pitchers and are using good pitchers in their place, but they also are not using John King, which is incredibly helpful.
John King, I feel like we haven't spent enough time shitting on John King on here, because I got to say, like, people complain about Fetty, people complain about Michaelis, right? Rightly so, but like, you need starting pitching, and you don't have a lot of starting pitching. John King has been on this team for 15 years now. He's been terrible the whole time. He's like the absolute back of the bullpen left-hander. Like, why is this guy still there? Like, does he like kind of hide out anytime they're looking to make a move and everybody forgets he's there, and then suddenly he's like back on the team bus? I don't know, but I'm gonna be plenty happy when John King departs. But I think the other thing is, like, John King is not like aggressively hateable. He's just like not good. He's just a below major league quality pitcher. And so yeah.
Yeah, it's just like how is this guy still around?
Shitting on Chunking.
Right, but it does it is right. Just like what why does he have a runway? You know, come on, man.
Yeah. No, it's bizarre, but anyway, we'll set that aside and let's move into some questions we got from folks. First couple, which do relate to pitching as well. So, Dr. Jacob W. And I wonder if Dr. Jacob is actually a doctor. That would be interesting for us to know. I don't know that he's written in before. So, hey, Dr. Jacob, let us know. And if you are a doctor, maybe we can get some free medical advice out of you, etc. But his question for us, he says, big fan. Okay, I'm already a fan of Dr. Jacob here for starting with big fan. Appreciate that. Pod question, why are you guys so down on McGreevy? Definitely fourth starter ceiling, but cost control and far better success in his first 12 starts at a younger age than the Michaelises and the Feddys. This is exactly the type of player the Cards used to be so good at churning out. Very valuable. Ben, I feel like that is our belief on McGreevy. Do you think maybe, first of all, tell me if you agree with that, and then do you think maybe just our tone has been a little too negative because you and I are surly?
That could be. I think that sometimes... with our tone, we can be a little bit surly, but also I think that we tend to, or at least this is definitely true about me. I shouldn't even lump you in with this. When I have like Chip Carey and Brad Thompson doing their clown show and they're just going on and on like about McGreevy, and then you'll see it in other places in the St. Louis media, and it's like, oh, McGreevy, and and the way that I have framed it is, like backup QB syndrome, like let's just not get carried away. And my whole thing has been, I am not saying that he should not be getting an opportunity. I am just saying, hey, his upside's probably a number 4 starter, if that. And as he attempts to reach that potential, there's going to be some ugly starts because his stuff is not very good. And that's all that I mean. And I think most fourth starters in Major League Baseball, they're in, the bottom 40% there of Major League pitchers typically, that, number 4 out of 5. Your stuff is not as good as an average starting pitcher, which is the quintessential number 3 starter. And so I hope that we have not come off too negative on McGreevy. We were definitely, I think some of the adjustments he has made and the way that he's pitched in AAA and then this year, I think have made him better. I was definitely way more down on him like 2 years ago in AAA, entering the season, than I am now, because I think he's shown the ability to adjust and is open to listening to player development and coaching, and I think that's a very good quality for a young big leaguer to have. I think it's probably more me recoiling at people oversell what I felt like they're overselling what McGreevy is, as a pitcher and a prospect. I agree, and Ben, you may be more surly than me, but I'm certainly surly as well. I don't know that we need to get into a surly off here, and I think that we do. And honestly, regardless of who the broadcasters or the media people are, they always have to kind of be spinning narratives, and so they do always kind of like fall in love with guys over kind of short periods of time. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure there's another way to do it. I think there'd be a lot of dead air if they didn't do it, but it does matriculate through the fans and through social media, and so I think oftentimes you and I are responding to that. I think in the same way that I think throughout Tommy Edman's time here, I think you and I, our kind of core argument was Tommy Edman is a very good player who's better used as a utility guy, still getting lots of plate appearances than kind of being like locked into these positions. But I also recognize that there were times where we spent 40 minutes of an episode shitting on Tommy Edman to get that point about his value across. because again, he was another player who just, the kind of collective
fan base it felt like was maybe more in love with than warranted. But no, everything you said is right there. And but back to the doctor's point, he is 100% right. And frankly, the next successful Cardinals team is going to have a Michael McGreevy in the number 4 and 5 type role. It's not going to have Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn and these guy and Miles Michaelis and these guys that they're these 30-year-old has-beens that they're paying tens of millions of dollars to. So he is absolutely right. Miles McGreevy is a path forward. He's not going to be the ace. He's not going to be the guy that is going out there and winning you game 7, locking it down necessarily. But yeah, huge part of making that happen.
Yeah, and with the regional cable contract situation, what it is, the next successful Cardinals team can't afford to have like 10% of its payroll tied up in a number 4 starter or a number 5 starter for that matter. And so 100% correct. They need pitchers like McGreevy, but they also need a starter or two above him in the rotation that's cost controlled. And that's the next accomplishment that the system needs to make in order to take that step forward. Liberatore is having a promising year in that direction, but they need another guy because Sonny Gray is not going to be around here too much longer, and they need a 2, and they need a 3. So we'll see if they can do that. Our next question comes from friend of the pod, John LaRue. I'm just monkeying around looking at minor league numbers for a lot of the Cardinals' top 40 pitching prospects. Mostly, I'm curious to see if some of the new front office approach is taking root. Obviously, there's a lot of misfortune. Tink Hence, the early season for Quinn Matthews, Jerpy, and Chen Wei Lin have been frustrating with injuries, but Roby was totally breaking out before his injury. Graceffo is a mixed bag, but his stuff plus on Fangraphs is notably better. I'm going to screw up the pronunciation of this again.
Oh, it's a Ishan.
Ishan Henderson and Hansel Rincon both have much better peripherals. Bryson Motts is having a huge breakout, and Andre Granillo was a minor league monster before his call-up. Again, mixed bag in MLB, but he was killing it in AAA.
Well, I think, the core of what John is saying there is he's curious to see if some of the new front office approach is taking root. So the question is, how do we know if the new front office approach is taking root with these pitchers? And I think, unfortunately, it takes a long time to see change happen. So, and he's done a good job of highlighting, a lot of the guys that are there. And, so yeah, anecdotally, there's these guys are doing well, but then, there's these guys that maybe aren't doing well. There's definitely a lot of these guys that are injured, but there's just probably not enough information there this season to tell us the story. And really, as we get, 2-3 years from now, I think it'll just sort of start coming into focus, but it's always going to be kind of soft around the edges. Like there's not going to be a hard line that's like, this, these are the before times and these are the Bloom times, because obviously Bloom's earliest impact was kind of in the sort of scouting and player acquisition, and player development. Well, he's been here already, a couple years. So how much influence did he have each of these, years leading up to when he actually kind of comes on as the general manager, right? We don't exactly know. And then with any player acquired kind of anywhere in there, there's always the, to what extent was this good analysis and they acquired someone with good skill set who was likely to develop versus who are guys that they that they put energy into the machine and and push them further. Go ahead, Ben. Sounds like
I was just gonna say, I think that what you're touching on, you're just hitting the nail absolutely on the head. And I think the Brewers do this very well, where they are good at looking at a guy and seeing the raw tools that they can turn into something, and they're good at helping players achieve their highest outcome as players.
Yeah.
And that's also on players that they acquire from other organizations, in the Brewers case. and I think with the Cardinals, like the early, I guess, canaries in the coal mine for my money are like Riley O'Brien and Fernandez, and the guys that they had an
Yeah.
opportunity to target from other organizations and bring them in, and and I would actually even add Swanson to that list as well, where like there's something there. Like he's an interesting prospect, and now you see him in games, and you're like, oh, this plays. Like this guy
Yeah.
can be a good
Yeah.
reliever, and I think those are kind of the early the guys who are at like at the cusp of the majors or are major league
Yeah.
ready. Granillo is another one. Uh, I would add to that list because he, as John mentioned in his comment, has had a really good season in AAA, and I think he's shown some promise in the majors. And not just because he pitched really well in relief in that horrible extra inning game when it was 105 degrees against the Reds that we saw, and then when we were walking around outside Busch Stadium, I was like, "Is that Granillo? Why is he out here at like 10 in the morning?" And then he left the stadium with his equipment bag 10 minutes later, and he was just getting his stuff because they sent him on the Memphis shuttle back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh,
Yeah,
they
you're
demoted
gonna fill
him.
the middle three innings and
Yeah.
go. You're gonna fill the middle three innings and go to
Yeah.
Memphis tomorrow. No, yeah, no, Ben, you're absolutely right, and I think O'Brien is a really great example that you point to. If this is somebody who is, because I don't know if people realize, I think he's 30, right? I mean, O'Brien is a guy who has not had. I think he's been in indie ball, like he's been kind of all over the place. So, but it's tough when it's guys that are coming from the minors. Where you really see this is like with the Dodgers, who have done it with guys like Max Muncy and Chris Taylor and these guys who like they were major league players somewhere else and kind of like mediocre, and then they came that you can definitely see it there. But yeah, there's some reason to be optimistic, even from those kind of early returns there. The other thing I'll say is the profile of the kind of pitcher that they're going after, particularly in this year's draft, was like markedly different. And it was not going after, the Michael McGreevy, the polished college, right-hander, with a 14% strikeout rate that we think is like almost major league ready. And, it was, it was going after guys with high, frankly, they really leaned on the high velocity fastballs, which I think makes a lot of sense because, that's one of the, I know, we are in the era where people can add velocity, but that's still one of the harder things to, necessarily add if you don't have that as a raw tool. So that tells me something too, that there is at least like, there's a philosophy there, there's an idea. And now that we see that, we'll have something to kind of measure it by going forward. Like, do we start to see, just them, being flooded by these guys? I mean, the Cubs went a very similar way a few years ago. And now, I mean, you watch the Cubs and their bullpen, it's like who? It's just guy after guy you've never heard of, but they're all throwing just sick stuff at 100 miles an hour. So,
and the Twins did that. I feel like they pivoted on what they were doing as an organization with pitching, and they traded away a bunch of those guys.
yeah.
But they still have some left, and it's still just like, man, they've still got more guys who are now. They've also claimed a whole bunch of relievers since the trade deadline, but so I'm hopeful that what we're seeing is the start of a pretty good assembly line of pitchers, so that they have that depth.
Yeah.
So that, hey, like if you're, if your number 4 starter goes down, oh, here's Carlos Martinez, here's Joe Kelly, or if you have a reliever go down, here's Lance Lynn, and he gasses it up out of the bullpen for half a season.
Here's Joe Kelly, here's Shelby Miller, here's guys that are going to be some of the best closers in baseball in 10 years.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But that's what you want to get back to, because it's been a bit of a drought. I mean, the Woodfords and all of that. So, not great.
Yeah, no, not great. But kind of rolling with a sort of similar theme here, Nate, and this question came in on the Cardinals Discord, asks, how aggressive will Bloom be in his first offseason in charge? He's had a few seasons to observe and should be ready to make some moves. I think this is a great question. I think this is probably something a lot of us are thinking about quite a bit these days. Ben, what do you expect?
Um, I think that we're going to see, um, more like late era Walt Jocketty pitching moves, um, where they're getting guys who have upside or guys that they think they can fix and plugging them into holes to create more depth in the rotation and the bullpen. Um, but I don't think he's going to be aggressive in the sense of going like, deep sea fishing for impact free agents. I think he will also, I think, be aggressive in shopping the players who don't have a lot of cost control left, because let's face it, they've had a huge attendance drop. I suspect that drop off was probably larger than they projected, and I think that the FanDuel subscriptions being monthly means that they're probably having a revenue fall off in August and September, when after they sell at the deadline and they're within striking distance but far enough out of the wild card that it's not too enticing. So I think that revenue is probably not as good as they were hoping, and I wonder what season ticket package renewals will be like for next season. And so I think they're going to try to clear some more payroll, and you just wonder what that's going to look like and whether or not, given a whole off season, they might be able to find a place that's to the liking of like a Sonny Gray or a Wilson Contreras. And I think we'll absolutely see some of the players with, they're getting up above $5 million in salary. I think he'll be shopping some of those guys who are up into their arbitration years as well.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you. I think there was a point earlier this season when they were in wild card position, and we had some hope that they would stay there. In a world where they had stayed, where they had gotten a postseason berth this year, and maybe felt like more definitively that some of these runway guys had stepped forward, more definitively than they have, at least thus far. I could kind of imagine a world where they did kind of sign a little bit of free agent talent in the offseason, and I think that would have made sense too, but it just doesn't seem like we've seen that this season. I honestly think next season I think is going to be almost exactly the same as this season. I don't and I think you're right. I think they'll if they can talk to and get a Gray or a Contreras or somebody to agree to go somewhere. I think they would certainly look at doing that, but I don't know that those guys will, and I also don't know that it's imperative. And I kind of think I don't think Bill DeWitt wants to field a last place team like from day one on purpose. He just doesn't seem like that's the way he is. So as stingy as the ownership can be in certain ways, I think that my sense is they would be perfectly happy to pay a couple Sonny Gray and Wilson Contreras types to have this kind of 82 win seasons they're having now, as opposed to just dumping it for like a 67 win season, or something disastrous like that. So I kind of anticipate not a lot of additions, but it's funny, so often I think you see teams overperform kind of that year before they're going to take a step forward. And so I do think that that's a possibility next year, even if they kind of stand pat. I think pitching is the starting pitching is really the biggest thing. I mean, we had hoped that maybe like Quinn Matthews would kind of possibly even come into the rotation this year and things like that. A lot of that, I mean, aside from McGreevy, there's just been nothing there. So Fetty's already gone, of course. Michaelis is going to be gone. I honestly don't know who comes in and pitches. So they may end up signing a free agent starter just because they have to. But I think that's kind of the universe of my expectations for next season. So, I think really they're on track for 2027, and so they'll kind of be they'll take advantage of whatever they can next year, but really it's going to be focused on that 2027 strike shortened season or lockout shortened season. So
yeah, and I think the most interesting thing is going to be Nolan Arenado, where I don't know if anyone wants him. Like at this
yeah,
point
I
in
don't think so.
time, how do they even move him? At least last
Yeah,
offseason, there was the hope, and he's had some health issues as well, and maybe that's a contributing factor. But you really need him on the field to show that's the case and give you some production with the bat. But right now, I mean, it just looks like they're either going to have to cut him loose and eat the contract, or just keep him and play him, and
yeah,
not play other players that they maybe would like to play more than him, like J.J. Weatherholt, or Nolan Gorman, or Brendan Donovan. And so, it's a conundrum that he is in there, and I don't know how he could get out of it. I mean, even if the Cardinals eat most, if not all, of that contract, there is not a very long list of organizations that he is interested in, and they're all competitive. And if you're a competitive team, an above average third baseman who's well below league average with the bat, even though he's been playing hurt, he's up in years. Why would you take a flyer on that?
yeah, yeah. There was a piece. I actually think it was a podcast. It might have been the 30 for 30 podcast they used to do on Ricky Henderson years ago, and I forget who they were talking to, but because and God, what was he like 44 his last season or something like that? But he wanted to keep playing, and the consensus was like he was good enough to be on a major league roster, right? He was like good enough to be a backup outfielder. And at that point, he was not he wasn't asking for money. Like he just wanted to play. So he would take so the money wasn't an issue either. So then it's like, well, why would anybody sign Ricky Henderson? Well, who wants that amount of baggage coming in as your, as a backup outfielder? And I mean, I'm not, that's not like a personal dig on Ricky, but just saying like this like legendary Hall of Fame player, but that's not at that level. Like, do you, like how much do you want to kind of take that on? That's kind of, and I think Arenado is almost putting himself or almost getting into that kind of a range. I mean, we talked about the way his contract is structured. The money's not terrible, but it's like, you can get kind of a league average-ish guy, who's like, 26 and, fine. And, have more freedom to, move that player around, do what you will with them, than you can with a guy who's, very much a like cusp of potential Hall of Famer. So I don't know. I think that could be something with Arenado too. At this point, I fully expect Arenado to, play out his career in St. Louis, but we'll see. It could go either way.
Maybe the Rockies would take him back.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be
like that front office seems lost in the wilderness. Unfortunately, John Mozeliak won't be around to fleece them in reverse to undo his mistake.
Yeah.
but I'm with you. I think, and he also, he just. I don't know what type of clubhouse presence he is, but he just, he seems kind of like an immature dude bro, and who maybe doesn't appreciate where he is now in his career, has that degree of self-awareness. So, and I could be wrong. I'm totally speculating just based on the limited viewing of his interviews and then his quotes in the paper. But it seems like something's going to have to give for them to address that issue this offseason, and I'm intrigued to see what, if anything, winds up giving. All right, on to our next question. Jake Wright asks, the Yachty era discourse has me thinking. A few years ago, FC Barcelona was struggling, And the solution was to bring in Xavi, a beloved former player turned manager who played during the most successful era in club history. It went to shit when he wanted more resources management refused to give. Long story short, he got fired after a couple years. The relationship between him and management imploded, and the fan base was furious with everyone. If Yachty is the manager on opening day 2026, what are the odds this happens when a cheapskate front office expects Yachty to win with spare parts?
I think this is a good question, but I think, and it's a great comp, and I think Jake's comp kind of shows why Yachty is not going to be the opening day manager in 2026, and I, if I had to guess, I would say I don't see it happening. It's just not the way things are going. I'll give you a baseball comp, and that's Ryne Sandberg, right? The late Ryne Sandberg, who departed us here recently, but he was kind of groomed through the Cubs minor league system, coached at several levels of their minor league system, seemed ready to kind of come up and take over the team, and then I can't even remember what jobber they hired instead of him, and then he went to the Phillies and kind of had a couple seasons there and more or less flamed out. But I think that honestly, some of what the kind of Arenado, Ricky Henderson example I was just giving, I think that's part of the problem when you bring back like a just absolutely beloved, legend player, is they bring so much with them, right? They bring so much kind of gravitas, but also so much baggage. And, there might be some very good things, of course, about what they're bringing, but from a front office perspective, it's maybe just not great. And I always thought that when Mo, when Tony left, I think he was really kind of realized, like, I don't want another Tony La Russa, right? I don't want another like big personality who's going to do this, and you can bag on Mo for it, but you see that really across the league. I mean, how many Hall of Fame players are there that are like managing somewhere? There's just there's not many. It doesn't happen real often. It just doesn't seem to line up. So yeah, I mean, I certainly think it wouldn't make sense to bring Yachty in to coach a spare parts team next year, which is what might happen. But I just don't see it really happening in general. The one thing I'll say is that I think there's, and the role of the manager just is evolving so much. I think it's almost hard for us to wrap our mind around it. I mean, they're middle managers, you and I have said, which I know like people use that as a really derogatory thing, and like it kind of is, but it also is just like kind of their role now, right? Like the front office used to have like nothing to do with what was happening on the field, like nothing at all, right? Like probably didn't watch the games. You know what I mean? And now it's this kind of fully integrated thing. So they just have to all be on the same page, and so I think they're just always looking for who's going to be on the same page with us, who's going to execute what we want them to do. I mean, again, the Dodgers are the most successful team of this era. As I always say, Dave Roberts gets a fax 5 minutes before the game starts that tells him what he's supposed to do, and he does it. And that's why he's just always kind of pretty pleasant in there, right? Because he's just doing what they told him to do, right? But he's got a good personality. He does have some history with the team, so you see some of those guys who they have that kind of going for them. So I don't know if they would, and I don't really want to get into the manager speculation thing, but were the Cardinals to go in an ex-player route, I think you're much more likely to see a Descalso or a Schumacher than you are to see Yachty or Pujols. Ben, what do you think?
I completely agree, and especially with where they are on the trajectory, they're going to, these are two highly competitive guys, and they're going to have to do things for the long term that the organization needs done that hurts them in the short term. And I don't know how that would work. If you're Albert Pujols and you want to win now, okay. If you're Yadier Molina, I was reminded of on Foul Territory, AJ Pierzynski saying that when he he has never seen a player run an organization the way that Yadier Molina ran the St. Louis Cardinals when he was there. And he literally said he ran the organization. Uh, and he even told the story. I think it was more of a joke, but maybe it was real. But like to make his point, like he was catching, and Matheny asked Yadi if he should take the pitcher out instead of Przinsky, and Yadi's like, I don't know. Why don't you ask the catcher? Like, I just, I'm thinking of like he's, he came up and he was so good at what he did. Tony La Russa, when was that? In '06 when he had the famous line, he helps you win even if he's hitting 200 or below 200 or whatever that quote was.
I think he could go 0 for the season.
Yes.
And
okay. Yeah. Oh, it's even better than I remember it. And so and of course he grew and blossomed and he was like, an all-time great player, but like, he is much more like of an era where he's just like he is a baseball like savant. What he's doing is more art than science. And the manager nowadays is much more science than art. It is they have studies on how much you need to use pitchers and who you need to use them against, and and so who's hot, who's down, it's all gonna be mapped out for you. And like there's that great anecdote, I think it was in the Athletic profile, where he went out, like he would set the defense, and he goes out and he sets the defense so that the hitter thinks that the pitch is coming one place, and then he calls he pitches against the defensive set that he just had.
Yeah.
And like stuff like that. And it's crazy.
Yeah. Did you hear that Fox game in the Cubs series? And I really hate to say this, but John Smoltz made an amazing analogy. I don't know if you were watching, and maybe other people have said this, but I hadn't heard this exact one. But and of course Smoltz pitched to Yadi his like last season when he was in St. Louis. So this isn't just like reputation kind of. This is like he was really legitimately talking from working with him. But he compared Yadi to a great defensive back. And he said, because what he does is he changes the other team's offense. And he said, and so, yes, one way is, he controlled the running game. So, like, the running game wasn't going to happen. But then he just talked about how, like, the way that he would pitch guys, the way he would do that, like, he would take away things that they wanted to do. And I thought I hadn't heard that exact analogy before, but I thought that is so accurate. And, like, what other defensive player can you think of like ever that really you kind of felt that there's guys that Pudge or somebody like amazing arm, like solid cat, like that, great just defensively as a catcher, but it just doesn't feel like there's been many that have kind of done that. We've kind of turned a manager question into us fawning over Yadi, but was the past week of Cardinals baseball about anything other than us just like remembering and fawning over the great Yadier Molina?
I was not at all prepared, Ben, for how soothing the cutaway shots to Yadier Molina in the dugout would be. Like it really was just like, oh, there's Yadi. Like that, okay. Yeah. So maybe we fans need it more than the organization needs it. If we're gonna be a 500 team, who wants to look at and listen to Oliver Marmol when we can look at and listen to Yadier Molina or Albert Pujols? That sounds much more palatable.
The one thing I will say is Bill DeWitt is a savvy businessman, and if revenue has really, really tanked, I think there's a chance that they're like, what would put some butts in the seats? Yadier Molina.
We're going to hire someone who's 4'2" and give him a half number. No, I'm that was his dad, right?
Yeah.
Or no, his dad wasn't an owner yet. He worked in the front office at that point in time.
He was in the front office.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was DeWitt's like jersey that they used as a bat.
Yes.
As I believe the story goes. So. All right, Ben, we're reaching that part of the season where you and I just wax about old baseball stories because there's not as much to talk about anymore. And that's okay, but we did have some great questions today, so thanks everybody for that. Ben, let's wrap it up with just maybe a little bit more on this year's team, or maybe not. You already gave us one thing you're looking for. Is there something else you're going to be looking for?
It's Jordan Walker. still. Like I'm just in like full on Jordan Walker mode, and the home run, his first since May. I think maybe I'm just feeling really positive. And when you say that out loud, why would I be looking for what this guy does? But
yeah, I know, it's like if he keeps at this pace, he might end up with as many home runs as Pedro Pais.
Yes, exactly. But it's more what are his power. What are his power numbers going to be here down the stretch? And that, I think, is really, when you look at swing choice and then the quality of contact, it's going to show up with him driving the ball in the air for extra base hits. And that's what I'm going to be watching for with him and pulling for him. Like, I really want it to happen.
We should go back and count how many of the weeks of this season one or the other of us said we're going to be watching Jordan Walker. Like, we really want him to succeed, both of us. So yeah, I hope it happens. Ben, here's the thing I'm going to be watching for. Jeff Jones primarily is the one that I've seen reporting on the date of this, but I believe this weekend is basically the time where someone who makes a major league debut does not lose a year of club control. And back when you and I were writing regularly, I knew these things, and I just don't know them anymore. But some of that has changed, but I trust his reporting. So this weekend, sometime soon, it's going to cross that point. And so I am really curious to see if they make a move, kind of right at that time, which is something that they've done before. I believe Mason Wynn came up kind of right at that point. So I'll be really interested to see if, the Cardinals bring a certain Mr. Weatherholt up to the major leagues. I feel like it's maybe about a 50-50 proposition that they do. Obviously, despite some, recent better results, not likely to be competitive this year, so it's not really so much about winning this year, but the way he's played in the minor leagues this year, you have to figure they assume he's going to break camp with a major league team next year, and they and other teams have just often shown that when they know that's going to happen, it's nice to kind of bring the guy up for a little bit at the end of the season before let him kind of get that exposure out of that. So I'm really curious to see that. Frankly, I don't know. I hope they do, just because it'll be interesting, right?
Yeah.
It'll be something else fun to watch. And frankly, like, he's just destroying the minor leagues. So, like, I realize it's a pretty fast, like, development curve for him, but, like, I've seen very few guys who just looked so unchallenged at the minor league levels. So it's hard for me to feel like, oh gosh, they're really, shortening his development by, not letting him, keep, OPSing 980 at every minor league level. So that's what I'm going to be watching for.
Well, I think everyone will be. It's a little bit of roster intrigue that's positive, right? Like it's fun roster intrigue instead of, oh, are they going to DFA Michaelis? We can look forward to them adding someone instead of hoping they get rid of someone who we can't stand. So I think we should all embrace it and keep our fingers crossed, because hopefully we'll see young Weather hold up.
Yeah, maybe they'll even DFA John King when they do it. Who knows, Ben? Anything can happen. All right. Anything else before we wrap up with folks?
No. I think we've done a good job wrapping things up here today. I hope everyone enjoys the dog days of summer as it draws to an end here. And I imagine, Ben, that tickets are pretty cheap at Busch Stadium on the secondary market nowadays, and it might be a good time to sneak down and get a good seat to see the Cardinals play here in the last 6 weeks of the season or so.
Yeah, I think that is a great idea. Ben, looking ahead, do you realize that our next off day is a Saturday?
No, I did not know that.
There's this one weird Saturday off day this year, and that will be our next off day on Saturday, August 23rd. So, yeah.
I think that probably coincides with like the start of the college football season. So people are going to be real excited to listen to a baseball podcast about a team that's 5 games out of the third wild card spot on the opening.
The
Saturday of the football season, right?
Yeah, Major League Baseball is like, we can't have the Cardinals play this day because everybody's going to want to watch Iowa State play a game in Ireland, which is happening on that day.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. I don't remember who they're playing. Let's say like Boise State. Let's just pick a team. So, anyway. The college football season, of course, is coming up. The NFL season's coming up, but it is still baseball season. And we will continue to be with you, and we will see you again on the next Cardinals Off Day.
Go Cardinals!